First off, thanks to all the people that commented on my last two videos with the giveaways. I have been trying to come up with ways to do giveaways, and I can't really come up with a really, a way that engages everybody, a way that's fair, and a way that it really makes everybody feel like they're included. I think choosing a comment at a random is not really, it's just a lottery, and it doesn't really benefit anybody but the winner. And I love you guys that commented, and I love everybody that got involved with the last two videos, but I also hate the fact that I asked for comments and I got like 1,000+ comments on on one of the videos. It's just a bunch of garbage, and now people can't read through the comments and actually respond to other people, so I hate that also. I have been fortunate enough to have a bunch of stuff being sent to me, and coming up soon I will happen upon 3 Nirvana controllers, probably that I might be giving all of them away, this charger, a bunch of other stuff that's coming that I'm going to be testing, high valued stuff, which is something that it doesn't really benefit to give it to one person, and I really want to engage you guys. I really want to engage all the people that do this kind of stuff. And I don't want to just do an acro competition, because then that's not fair, because then the person that's the best pilot pretty much wins. Even if you guys vote on it, then it's a popularity contest. That's just not my style. I don't want to do that. So I've been trying to come up with ways to do giveaways for valuable things, at least $100+ things, but make it fun and engaging for everybody. So I'm going to ask you guys, please give me ideas on how to do some sort of a video response giveaway. I want people to make videos. We fly all these things, and honestly, nobody really pays that much attention to flight videos ever, and especially not anymore unless you're like exceptionally skilled. And we all just love watching our own videos, but what can we do to make it more fun? Now, I have 1 or 2 ideas which I'm going to be demoing hopefully in the next video, but I want to hear from you guys what you think would be really fun for you guys to do. It's kind of like an ice bucket challenge, but that easy to do, but more FPV stuff. Anyways, okay. So the first thing I want to talk about are these 2 chargers. And so the D2 charger, the ISDT D2 charger, I love the ISDT company because they do things that are much more original and unique compared to all the other charger companies, but they also are very much a Chinese company that think that they know best and they know everything right, and they don't really take feedback from many people. And I've spoken to a couple people that work with Chinese companies that are in Hong Kong, and they have said very much the same thing. So it's a kind of a love-hate relationship with ISDT, but I really thank them for their products because they're really awesome. The D2 charger has been my primary charger since I got it. It is the most convenient charger I've used. You don't have to set your voltage. When you set one channel, it copies it over to the other channel immediately, so it's super duper convenient to use. And that's why I love it. The one biggest thing that it's missing, and it's also very small and compact. The one biggest thing that it's missing, it has a DC charger, AC/DC converter built in as well, and it charges at 5 amps or 6 amps each channel, 6S, so it's really got everything I need. And the biggest drawback is that it's nice and small and compact, but it doesn't take DC voltage in. It only takes AC voltage in. And as soon as I got the charger, I contacted ISDT and I said, why on earth are you guys only doing DC AC volt? Can you please just add a DC plug on this thing? To which they said okay, and did nothing. I didn't even come up with a new charger. So now I think it's been 2 years now, and this company emailed me and said, we have a new charger. I bet that this charger was strongly inspired by the ISDT D2, because I'm pretty sure they're using about the exact same firmware, except that the firmware on this charger seems like it's updated. It's just got more functions overall. But regardless, there's positives and negatives about both chargers. I'm not going to go into detail about all of it because that's just not what I do. I definitely like the way the D2 looks better, and the biggest drawback of this is that the screen is just not as nice as the D2. The D2 has it's much more colorful. It's, you can see it from more viewing angles, and the screen on this thing is just not as nice. It's like a bad laptop screen, but it's still viewable, and we don't really use the screen that much. We just need the damn thing to charge. So the reason why I have completely switched over to this charger is because it is exactly the D2 charger, except in an uglier shell, a little bit smaller, but uglier shell, and it takes 6S voltage in. So I can now have one charger that does it all. I can travel with it. I can take it wherever I want. It's nice and small. It fits in my bag. It takes AC in, 100 volts to 40 volts, so it goes around the world, and it takes 6S battery voltage input, so I can charge it in the field as well with my big batteries. You can see this is the screen, and I mean, it's sunlight out, so it's hard to see. One other drawback, which is annoying, is that for the 2 channels, you have to push this button to flip through them, and on the D2 charger, there is a dedicated button for each channel. There are still the same issues with the D2 charger on this charger as well, namely when you are searching through menus and you are scrolling up and down with this jog wheel, which I don't know why it's sideways, but whatever. One click on the jog wheel is not always one click on the actual screen. Sometimes it jumps through multiple clicks, each like click on the wheel, so that's kind of annoying. It's not like as accurate, so you can't just quickly scroll to something. This charger does have a couple more features and functions than the D2, but I don't care about that. It has a wireless cell phone charger on top as well. It's got the USB ports on the side, whatever. None of that matters. It's essentially the same charger. It has the same AC/DC built in, and it takes 30 volts input. So hands down, it's the winner. It does cost $10, $15 more depending on where you get it from, and it's, as far as I can tell, only sold on Amazon at this point. But yeah, this would be my pick for somebody that's going to be spending money on a charger, just because it has all the same convenience as the D2, which I love. I don't need 4 charging ports. I don't charge 1,000 batteries at a time. I hate parallel charging. It's too much of a hassle. I have to think about the voltages. I got to put them together and make sure I don't plug things in backwards. I've burnt a number of balance boards just plugging batteries in, because clearly I'm an idiot and I can't do that correctly, and I don't expect anybody else to be any less of an idiot than me. We're all idiots at times, so I'm comfortable with that, and I have much more comfort using just 2 independent channels. Even though this charger is great, it's still not even close to the ideal charger that I would personally want. I really hope my ideal charger is made someday, but anyways, that's that. This charger is awesome so far. I haven't done a longevity test. I have had it for exactly 1 day. Quick note about this thing. This is the Swift Micro 3. Yeah, number 3. I don't know why there have to be so many. It seems to me the only notable difference is that it doesn't actually have a controller to change the settings. You have to wire it into a UART because it has the RX and TX. Believe me, I tried to change settings with the controller, and I was using it on a quad that doesn't have a spare UART to do that with, so I couldn't change the settings, so I just took it out. Additionally, it's the same CCD sensor from the original HS1177s of many, many years ago. I don't know why they keep updating it and calling it a new camera and trying to resell it, but it's the same crappy resolution. It's the same awful view. I don't know why. I just don't know why. I would highly recommend you take a look at a Micro Eagle. It's just beautiful compared to this camera. And yeah, if you like the CCD cameras, here's another option. I'm sure there's other things that are different about it, but it's the same camera to me. So the main discussion, 4S versus 6S acro. And when Steele came out with this video recently, okay, so disclaimer, I really like Steele. I think he's an awesome guy. I think he's an awesome pilot. I've met him a number of times. A lot of people think he's an asshole. He's really not. In person, he's a really cool guy. He does act much more professional than most other people in the space. When he came out with his video recently of the 6S versus 4S acro quad, I had like 30 people send me a link to it saying, look at this, look what Steele's doing. He's saying he's getting double the flight time on 6S. Okay, so Steele is comparing, okay, let me back up a little bit. Steele says that his quads weigh 600 grams or less than 600 grams. I really have a hard time believing that, and I'd really, next time I see him, I'm gonna hopefully find a scale and weigh one of his quads, because his base frame, the Alien base frame, as listed on the Impulse RC website, I don't know if it's changed, I don't know if they've cut a lot of weight off of it, the base frame is 54 grams more than my base frame. So right off the bat, he has a 54 gram handicap compared to my builds. And the weights that he says he flies at are about the same weights that I say I fly at, which is around 580 to 610 grams, maybe 615 grams. That's kind of the weight that I like to stay in, and I really prefer it to be closer to 580 than anything above 600 grams. And the next thing, I didn't watch, I watched this video, but I kind of skipped through it. I also watched it at 2x speed, so I don't watch everybody's videos. I don't have time to sit there and watch everybody's videos. I do love watching videos, but I can't keep up on everything. But I did watch this particular video on 2x speed, and sorry if I missed a couple details, but he's comparing a 1100 milliamp 6S battery to a 1300 milliamp 4S battery. If you compare a 4S 1300 to 6S, the equivalent 6S battery is actually 866 milliamps. And depending on how you do your math, the 1100 milliamp 6S compared to the 1300 4S is about 27 to 33% more overall capacity. And right up front, I'm going to say one of the main advantages of 6S is that you can generally get more capacity into the battery with a similar weight, because you don't need to have the best cells in the world. You can have a little bit lower C cells or a little crappier cells, and you can still get excellent performance because you're not drawing 200 amps out of your battery. So in general, 6S batteries have the potential to technically weigh less when compared to their overall energy density or energy capacity. And so his quad is also very efficient, and when he's comparing these two quads, they're totally different. And the two batteries are totally different. The larger battery is, of course, better at managing the amps. Plus, it's a 6S, so the amps are even lower. So, of course, it's going to have a much better flight time, because right off the bat, it's got about 30% more battery energy in general. The quad, he claims, weighs very similar, which it probably does. And he's not drawing as many amps out of it, and the battery can sustain those amps much easier. So, I don't know about double the flight time, but yeah, of course it's going to get a lot better flight time when you have 30% more capacity and you're not drawing as much amps or just not stressing the battery as much. So that's the number one advantage of 6S, aside from the fact that you don't get voltage sag at all. You get zero voltage sag, which is awesome, but also not awesome at the same time. You kind of have to, know how to deal with it. But those are the main advantages why 6S is quickly becoming a standard for racing. Now, acro is a different story. We don't really race all out like crazy mad people, so we don't really need all that performance, all that power all the time. We prefer kind of something that has really, really excellent control and flies really, really smoothly. And before I talk about the rest, there's a video that's been playing that is the 6S quad, my 6S quad, which is this quad on the left, that's running a 1050 milliamp 6S battery, which is the closest battery size to a 1500 milliamp that I have. The equivalent of a 1500 milliamp 4S battery in 6S is actually 1000 milliamps. I don't have a 1000 milliamp battery. The 6S 1050 milliamp battery is 185 grams. The 1500 milliamp 4S battery is 189 grams, although it is a China hobby line, so they do typically weigh a couple grams more, but they are very comparable weights. And as you will see in the video, the 4S quad, which weighs more in general, which you'll see, flies for longer than the 6S quad. And so you can clearly see that 6S is not going to give you double the flight time. Yes, you can get double the flight time easier than on 4S, but it's not going to automatically give you double the flight time. Things are much more complicated than that, and there's a lot of other factors that play into performance and what you like flying and flight time. And if all you're going for is flight time, yeah, by all means, go get a 1300 milliamp 6S battery, which is what they're racing now for some reason, and throw it on your quad with low KV, and for sure you're going to get double the flight. Well, actually not for sure. You're going to have a lot more weight, so you potentially will not get even close to double the flight time. There are diminishing returns as you go up in weight and start getting batteries, so whatever. It's a different discussion entirely. So first and foremost, let's look at the weights of these two quads. I have a scale right here for you, so you can see that I'm definitely not lying. This is the 4S 2207 quad. I put it on the scale with GoPro and ND filter and everything all ready to go minus the battery. It is 425 grams. And now this is the 6S quad with 2205 motors with GoPro and ND filter and everything ready to go, and it is 366 grams. So right off the bat, this particular 6S quad has a 60 gram advantage, although it is using a standard whip antenna because I was just too lazy to look for another antenna. So you can add another 5 grams to that because I would typically use a circularly polarized antenna. You can also see that this 6S quad is using the Emax 20x20 stack, which is awesome, by the way, and it does do 6S low KV just fine. I'm very, 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 very happy with this ESC board on the stack. The flight controller is okay. The VTX I'm not too crazy about, but it's also okay. I wish it kind of did higher milliamps. If it did, I would just kind of like be okay with it. But yeah, the stack in general performs impressively well. I'm very impressed with it. I don't know if it's going to hold up long term, but it performs impressively well. And now let's discuss the motors real quick. So these motors are the Brother Hobby R6. 2205 1750 kV motors. They're made to be 6S motors. This particular motor from Brother Hobby is the most updated version of their 2205, or the R6 motor. It's because it's the R6, and it is a stellar motor. I have to say I'm very impressed with the motor. I haven't actually used a more recent Brother Hobby motor aside from our Hyperlite motors, which are partially made by Brother Hobby, not completely made by Brother Hobby. And our Hyperlite motor, this motor is actually technically more updated than the Hyperlite motor. Although the Hyperlite motor is lighter, this is a 27 gram 2205 motor, and the reason it weighs more is because it has thicker magnets. It's got a 9mm bearing instead of the 8mm bearing. Otherwise, the construction is overall exactly the same. It's got really nice, neat windings. It's got the titanium shaft all the way through. It's got, unfortunately, no lip underneath the magnet bell, but Brother Hobby is not one of those companies that has a problem with slipping magnets. The motor performs stellar overall, and I'll get to what I think about acro and racing in general, but the motor is great, and right now it's probably kind of hard to find because 6S motors are hard to come by. It's on, the link's in the description below if you go take a look. So now let's take a look at my all-up weights when I fly my 2207 quads. By the way, this is my favorite 2207 quad at the moment. It is running the RCX LS2207 motors. They're fantastic motors, but they do weigh about 1.7-ish grams or 1.6 grams more than the equivalent Hyperlite motor, but they do perform stellar. I really, really love them, particularly because they have a 9mm bearing instead of the 8mm bearing, and I personally think that the 9mm bearing is probably the biggest advantage of any kind of motor update that we've had over the years. Anyways, so the batteries that I typically run on this quad or any of my 2207, very important that you realize 2207, because I'm going to talk about the 2205 in a second. 2207 acro quads is 1300. I prefer a 1300 battery, and with the 1300 battery, it's 599 grams. It's usually a little bit less than that, but I have another battery that's a little bit lighter that I prefer, which puts it down to like around 591 grams, and that's really a really good weight for me. I think it flies great. It has really good performance, really good response. I have really good flight feel. But if I'm flying in a much more open environment where I need to be on the gas more, then I typically put a 1500 milliamp battery on, and that weighs more. So it's 615 grams all up weight. The quad doesn't fly the way I want with this battery. Yes, I can absolutely feel a difference between 15 grams. Like you're at that break point where the quad starts flying crappy. So it's like 590 is where it starts to get bad, and then once you pass 590 and keep going, then it gets worse and worse and worse, and it gets worse much quicker as you pass 600 grams. To me, on my quads, it's just my experience. You might have your own experience. Other pilots have their own experience. I don't like heavier quads. I prefer lighter quads. So to me, once you pass 600 grams, it starts getting much worse. But if I'm in an open environment, then I'm holding the gas down. I need to have the larger capacity that can handle more amps so that I can actually get around easier. So let's look at the 6S quad now. So the 6S quad, the base weight is 360, I don't know, it gained a gram over the last hour. Anyways, 367 grams, about 58 grams lighter than the 4S quad. So right off the bat, it's got a 58 gram advantage, although it doesn't have the antenna, which you can add about 5 grams, and it also has 2205 motors instead of 2207 motors. And I'll get to the comparison between the motor sizes and 6S versus 4S in a second. But the equivalent battery to a 1500 milliamp battery on this 6S quad is going to be a 1000. I have a 1050 milliamp, a very good comparable 1050 milliamp, and it's 553 grams. The quad flies absolutely awesome. I love it. It's great. The weight is awesome. I really love the weight. I cannot emphasize that enough. 550 grams feels awesome in the air. A little bit less feels even better. 550 grams on an acro quad feels awesome. Unfortunately, I don't have a comparable 1300 milliamp 4S to 6S battery, which would be around 860 milliamps, so I would want like a 900 milliamp 6S battery. When you go up to 6S, the voltages change so much so that 100 milliamps actually does make a pretty big difference in the overall battery size and weight. I do, however, have a 550 milliamp 6S battery from GMB because that's the smallest battery that PureFlip had. And when I put this, and I did fly it with this 550 milliamp, which I'll show you in a second, but when I put this on there, it is 480 grams, and it feels even more incredible than the 550 gram 6S setup. Anyways, so let's talk about motor sizes, 6S versus 4S. So I have been testing 6S and various motor sizes for many, many years. Things have changed a lot in the last year or two a lot, but not. They have, but haven't changed. So we've gotten a lot of motor updates, but we haven't got a lot of motor updates, and we've gotten a couple of components that have updated as well. And the thing about 6S is that it's much more touchy about weight, and it's also more difficult to keep your weight down on 6S, and that's why I personally haven't moved to 6S, and I'm not really crazy about it, or I haven't been crazy about it. And I'm also very slow to kind of catch up on these things because I do work. I don't have that much free time, so I could have done this video like 6 months ago because all the parts were mostly available, but I just didn't have the time. So 6S in general is much more touchy about weight. A 4S quad has a more weight differential. It seems to have a wider weight differential. When you put extra weight on a 6S quad, it starts to feel worse very quickly. And when I say 6S, I don't mean 6S 2100 kV, 2300 kV. I only mean a comparable RPM 6S motor versus a 4S motor. So when you build up the same quad with the same performance and the same everything on 6S, you need to have it be a little bit lighter, or at least the same weight as the 4S quad to get similar performance. In the past, I've flown 6S quads that were the same weight or a little bit more, and they just felt bad, and that's why I just didn't like them. This quad weighs significantly less, and it needs that significantly less weight because I don't know why, it just doesn't feel right otherwise. So I'm gonna say that immediately, 6S, you gotta have a little bit less weight. At least that's my preference. Maybe you have a totally different preference. Keep in mind that I'm just one person giving you my experience of testing a whole bunch of stuff. That's pretty much all I do is test stuff. The 2205 motor, this particular 2205 motor is particularly good because it has the highest construction level that we know of in motors today, or at least I know of in motors today. It's got a super tight air gap, super strong magnets, 0.15 millimeter lamination. It's got the nice windings. It's got the 9 millimeter bearing. Everything about this motor is top tier. So it performs much better than an average or typical 2205 motor. Now, these days it's kind of hard to find a typical 2205 motor. They all kind of have pretty good construction. But this particular motor, I like it because it does perform very well. Now, the issue I've had with 2205 motors in the past is that they have a very narrow power band in general. Like, just the power band is around 55% to 75%, and then outside that range, it kind of feels anemic. On 6S, people say 6S is more torque. I don't know about torque, and actually Ryan Harrell of Mini Quad Test Bench, he tells me that amps are actually directly related to torque. It's not voltage. So technically, a 4S battery pushing more amps, which it does, it has to, gives you directly proportionally more torque than a 6S battery. Now, voltage does increase your torque as well, but it's by a roundabout method when you look at the math, which I haven't looked at because I just take what Ryan Harrell tells me as gospel, but I don't know if it actually is more torque, and I actually think that it's more meaningful to look at the kV and the overall power output and setup and whatever, rather than expecting more torque on 6S, which I don't really feel. What I do feel is that I have more immediacy of just power. It's not necessarily more torque. Torque is elusive, like I've said in the past. I don't even know how to properly define torque in terms of this mini quad and saying this quad has more torque, that quad has less torque. I just know that it feels like it has more immediate power, and that's what people feel when they try 6S. They think, oh my god, so much power, so much punch, so much everything. And I do feel that as well. And this motor also has more equivalent kV than the 4S version. So the 4S motor I have is 2500 kV. This 6S motor is 1750 kV. The equivalent RPM or kV in 4S would be 2625 kV. So when you compare it's a 2480 kV motor compared to a 2650 kV motor on a 2207, it is a pretty significant difference. So I am getting more RPM, and I have what I'm going to assume is probably more torque at the top end, because voltage, as everybody is assuming, is probably giving me a little bit more performance at the top end as well. So I do have both the power, torque, whatever you want to call it, and the kV to push the props faster and faster. The end result being that this quad flies faster than the 2207 4S quad that I have that I'm comparing it to. The flight feel is also very similar, meaning that I have the same kind of power band feel, and that I would attribute to the high construction of the motor. If you're using a low construction motor that just doesn't have the same kind of performance, you're going to get a tighter power band. This particular motor is a pretty wide power band already because of the construction. Additionally, when you go up in voltage, what I have felt is that on motors you do spread out that power band even more. So that is a double advantage there, and I feel like the 2205 motor, while I would like to have more stator size, and I do think that 2207 on 6S is better overall, this works really well also, and I prefer the lower weight. So I'm not looking for the highest, best, greatest power motor for acro, for freestyle, for flight feel. I just want a motor that feels good in the air. And this motor does feel very comparable to a 2207 when the quad is light. Like I keep saying, it's got to have the reduced weight. If I just strap a rock onto this quad or just use a bigger battery to make it the same weight, the same 600 grams as the 2207 4S quad, it does not feel good. It feels very, very bad, and I would prefer the 2207 quad on 4S way in advance before I start flying this thing. But when you drop the weight 50 grams, yes, now it feels awesome. But also keep in mind that I'm comparing two quads that are very, very different. This quad has a super tiny little stack, and it is naturally much lighter, and it has smaller motors, so it naturally has more agility because it has less weight on the end of the arms, and the motors are still very powerful. So it has the ability to actually turn and rotate and flip itself much easier because it doesn't have to swing these 34, 35 gram motors off the end of its arms. These motors are much, much lighter. I'm going to kind of stop the discussion there about all those details because I could just keep going on and on. But also the other thing I'm going to look at about 6S batteries is that they don't necessarily need to cost more, and they don't necessarily need to weigh more either. Like I said, the 1000 milliamp 6S battery is equivalent to a 1500 milliamp 4S battery, and it does weigh very, very similar, and it usually will weigh a couple grams less depending on what brands and what kind of cells you're looking at. I do generally think that the 1000 to 1150 milliamp 6S batteries will become the standard going forward. I know that they're moving to 1150 for racing, and they're also moving to 2205 for racing as well, so that's really nice of them because that really fits the acro environment very well too. The batteries also don't need to cost more. They will cost about the same. You are generally getting the same amount of battery stuff. You're just getting a little bit more wrapping, and it might take just a little bit more manpower to put the battery together, so it might cost like $1 more, but in general I expect battery prices to come down and be about the same when you compare a 1500 milliamp 4S to a 1000 milliamp 6S, and I do hope and expect that a 1000 milliamp 6S battery in the $24 range will become made available sometime in the next couple of months, and that will be pretty much the standard battery that is, you know, widespread spread across the community come 2019. But I did show you that I have this 550 milliamp 6S battery, and the 4S versus 6S discussion can go on and on and on forever, and the advantages are well known. On 6S you get less voltage sag, you generally can use more of your battery capacity without problem. The parts that I don't like is that it's much more difficult to tell when your quad is about to completely die, because when you do start getting voltage sag or you start getting battery warnings, your battery is pretty much dead. It's really close to dead. On a 4S battery, even a 1500 milliamp 4S battery, I can punch the gas and hold it wide open, and I can get battery warnings right off the bat with a fresh battery, which is not really good, but it also kind of tells me where my limits are on the quad, and I've become very comfortable flying with that. I don't look at my milliamp readout, I don't look at any of that crap anymore. I only look at my low battery voltage warnings, and that's when I know when to land. When I get more of those, then I know I'm pretty much depleted. On a 6S quad, I don't get those. On this 550 milliamp 6S battery, I do get very similar voltage sag warnings compared to a 4S battery. And I know you're probably thinking that 550 milliamp 6S sounds absolutely preposterous. Additionally, it's using an XT30 connector. It doesn't even have an XT60 connector on it. This is equivalent to a 825 milliamp 4S battery. How on earth could this even work out well? But I'm telling you, I'm showing you, the video is playing right now. I get 2 minutes flight time on this 550 milliamp 6S battery, and the quad weighs 480 grams, and you might notice that it flies absolutely like butter. Like, it has so much control, and it is so awesome to fly. I love it, and I really wish that I could make this battery work all the time for me. I am going to have to move to a very light 1000 milliamp battery just because I like having the extra flight time too. Why not? Everybody likes having the extra flight time, and plus I don't have to have different batteries. I can have the same battery in a wide open environment as well as a tight environment. But this 550 milliamp battery gives me a similar 2-minute flight time compared to a 1300 milliamp battery on my 4S quad. and I get very similar low voltage warnings on the 550 milliamp battery as well, which is not actually nice. I don't actually like that, but you know, I'm used to it because I've been flying 4S for so long. So it's really incredible to feel, but it's not sustainable. So I would actually want to use a 1000 milliamp 6S. The other thing that I want to discuss is the XT30 connector. So I did predict that when you move up to 6S, you don't actually need the big, I mean, we're pushing 200 amps out of an XT60 connector. And if you talk to the guys that race really hardcore, particularly Andy on DCL, they melted an XT60 connector off of the wire. It actually desoldered itself. So if that's happening to an XT60, how on earth can an XT30 hold up to the power? And I don't really remember my electrical engineering stuff very much, but in general, if you just consider an XT30 versus an XT60, it's obviously a much smaller connector. So you should technically have more trouble running it, but this connector did not get even warm, did not even begin to get warm. I ran like 6 or 7 cycles on this battery, and it didn't get warm. The battery got warm. The battery definitely got warm, but the connector did not get warm at all. So going forward, I'm actually going to find a 1050 milliamp battery. I'm going to build a quad with an XT30 on this size wire as well. I think this wire it's actually 14 gauge. I don't know how they soldered a 14 gauge wire to an XT30, but I'm going to use 16 gauge wire going forward on my acro quads, and I'm going to be using XT30 connectors, and I'm going to see how that holds up. I'm also going to be using a very special motor that we're developing, the new Hyperlight motor, which I expect to be very good because I now see that 2205 is useful for acro once again when you have the lower weight and when you really manage everything well. So to sum it all up, 6S for acro can feel very good. You need a high construction motor, and I would highly recommend you have generally a little bit less weight than your equivalent 4S counterpart, or you need to have comparable sized motors and a comparable KV in the 6S version to your 4S quad. You can't be running a quad that weighs 30-40 grams more than your 4S quad and expect it to perform similarly. Weight is much easier to pile on when you're using 6S. You have to use bigger capacitors. You have more wrapping in your battery. We don't have access to smaller batteries yet, or the appropriate size batteries yet, or at least there isn't enough of them yet to have a wide selection. If you're using the same motor, and now we're moving to higher construction quality motors with the 9mm bearings, they are going to start weighing more, so you naturally will gain more weight because of all the motor construction improvements, which do actually benefit quite a bit. But you now have to consider all of that together, plus the frame weights. Frames are, I mean, my frame is one of the lightest frames at around 90 grams for the 5-inch FlosStyle acro version. The other massive benefits of reducing weight is that you don't break your frame as often. Nothing breaks as easily. And people have shown me tons of their FlosStyle frames that are broken, but I haven't broken a single arm on my FlosStyles. Maybe that has to do with the fact that my quads are less weight. I don't crash any less often than anybody else, and I definitely don't crash any less hard, although I don't fly around, concrete structures as much. I just don't have areas to fly as much, unfortunately. I hope this was helpful. I really hope this was like informational. I hope you gained something out of this. This is just kind of me talking. Like, I just turned the video camera on, I just started talking. So I hope somebody got something out of it. And for now, the two most ideal motors that I've tested so far in 6S is this Brother Hobby 2205 motor, and also the Emax 2306 motor in 1600 kV. This motor performs excellent. It does need a more aggressive prop, however. So you see that I have the HQ 5x4.6x3 on there, and I typically now use the T motor 5.1x4.3 super light prop, which feels just awesome in the air, and I really love it. It has no durability, but it feels freaking awesome in the air, so I'm going to keep using it. It does have a little bit of issues. I really hope that somebody comes out with a prop. I know that Dahl is coming out with a similar prop, another similar prop, not the 5150, because that's a really high load prop. Okay, I'm going to keep going on forever. Hope this was helpful. Don't forget to floss your teeth. Take care. Bye.